The morning of December 7, 1941, Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Japanese Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto stood in the operation room of the flagship Nagato, receiving reports of the attack he had orchestrated. The strike was devastatingly successful. 8 battleships damaged or sunk, over 2,400 Americans dead, the Pacific Fleet crippled. Yet Yamamoto felt no celebration. He had spent years in the United States, studied at Harvard, served as a naval attaché in Washington. He had visited the automobile factories of Detroit, witnessed the oil fields of Texas, observed the scale of American industrial infrastructure. His staff officers celebrated what they believed was a decisive victory. Yamamoto knew differently. In his diary, he recorded words that captured what truly terrified him about what Japan had just done. Not American military prowess, not the fighting spirit of American soldiers, but something far more devastating to Japanese war plans: American industrial capacity. The ability of the United States to produce war materials at rates that seemed impossible to Japanese military planners. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. Within weeks of Pearl Harbor, Japanese intelligence officers began compiling estimates of American production capacity. Their assessments focused on what they believed they knew. American aircraft production for 1942 was estimated with reasonable accuracy. Naval construction was projected based on known American shipyard capacity. But there was one category where Japanese intelligence would prove catastrophically wrong: merchant shipping. Japan's naval staff estimated American merchant ship construction capacity at approximately 5 million tons for 1943, a substantial figure that suggested the United States could potentially replace shipping losses. The actual, American production in 1943 would reach 19.2 million tons, nearly 4 times Japanese estimates. The Japanese had failed to account for what American industry could achieve when fully mobilized. They understood American quantity in abstract terms, but could not conceive of American quality mated to incredible quantity. Fighting spirit, sound strategic minds, managerial expertise, and globe-circling logistics operating at speeds that defied traditional manufacturing assumptions. The transformation began in December 1940, when Henry J. Kaiser, a construction magnate who had never built a ship, signed his first shipbuilding contract with the United States Maritime Commission. Traditional shipbuilders dismissed him as a naive opportunist. The Todd Bath Iron Works, one of America's oldest shipyards, reluctantly agreed to partner with Kaiser, assuming their expertise would compensate for his ignorance of maritime tradition. What none of them understood was that Kaiser's lack of shipbuilding experience would become his revolutionary advantage. He would treat shipbuilding not as a craft tradition passed down through generations, but as a manufacturing problem to be solved through systematization and mass production techniques borrowed from automobile assembly lines. By September 1941, the first Liberty ship, the SS Patrick Henry, had been launched after 244 days of construction. Traditional methods, skilled craftsmen, sequential building from keel to deck, the approach that had dominated shipbuilding since before the American Revolution. But Kaiser and his engineers were already implementing changes that would transform everything. They examined Ford Motor Company assembly lines where workers installed prefabricated components at each station. They proposed eliminating riveting entirely in favor of electric arc welding, a technique Kaiser had mastered building pipelines across the American West. Each Liberty ship built conventionally required approximately 1 million rivets. A skilled riveting crew might install 100 rivets per day. The mathematics were stark. Welding could be done dramatically faster, and welders could be trained in weeks rather than the years required for rivet crews. Vice Admiral Emory Land, chairman of the United States Maritime Commission, examined Kaiser's proposals with deep skepticism. His private correspondence revealed the maritime establishment's reaction. Welding had never been proven reliable for hull construction at this scale. The British Navy forbade welding on warship hulls. Kaiser was proposing America bet its supply lines on unproven technology. Yet land also recognized desperation. German U-boats were sinking Allied shipping faster than traditional shipyards could replace vessels. In 1941 alone, approximately 3.6 million tons of Allied shipping went to the ocean floor. Britain was literally starving. American shipyards using conventional methods required an average of 230 days to build a single cargo ship. At that pace, the Allies would lose the Battle of the Atlantic before American industry could respond. The Richmond shipyard rose from empty mudflats in California between January and December 1941. Kaiser's construction crews erected a facility that horrified traditional maritime engineers. Instead of massive gantry cranes and longitudinal building ways, Richmond featured open areas for prefabrication surrounded by 7 parallel building ways. Railroad tracks crisscrossed the facility, designed to move massive steel sections weighing up to 150 tons. Overhead cranes capable of lifting entire ship sections stood every 100 feet. John Riley, chief naval architect for Bethlehem Steel Corporation and a 30-year veteran of shipbuilding, visited Richmond in May 1941. His inspection report contained technical criticism and grudging admiration. Kaiser had violated every principle of efficient shipyard layout Riley had learned in 3 decades. His prefabrication areas were too large. His crane capacity was absurdly excessive. Yet Riley had to admit the facility was designed for exactly what Kaiser claimed: rapid assembly of prefabricated sections. The workers who arrived in Richmond beginning in August 1941 came from everywhere except traditional maritime communities. Kaiser advertised in newspapers across America, offering wages 20% above standard industrial rates and promising to train anyone willing to work: former secretaries, farmers, housewives, laborers who had never seen the ocean. Traditional welders spent 4 years as apprentices learning comprehensive skills. Kaiser's instructors taught specific techniques for specific tasks in approximately 2 weeks. Workers didn't need to know how to weld everything, only how to weld vertical seams on bulkheads or horizontal deck plates or curved hull sections. Tasks they would perform repeatedly until muscle memory replaced extensive knowledge. By October 1941, Kaiser employed over 10,000 workers in Richmond. Fewer than 200 had any previous maritime experience. As 1942 progressed, something unexpected occurred. Construction time for Liberty ships began falling dramatically. Kaiser's first Liberty ship took 197 days. Ship number 2 required 169 days. Ship number 5, 128 days. Ship number 10, 97 days. By spring 1942, Richmond was completing Liberty ships in 70 days on average. Traditional shipyards watched with alarm as this untrained workforce achieved production speeds matching their own highly skilled crews. The prefabrication approach that traditional builders had dismissed proved its power. Instead of building ships from keel to deck in sequence, Kaiser's yards fabricated entire sections simultaneously across the facility. While one crew assembled a bow section in the prefabrication area, other crews built stern sections, deck houses, engine rooms, and bulkheads in parallel. When sections were complete, massive cranes lifted them onto the building ways where welding crews joined them together. Albert Wooding, production supervisor at Richmond Yard No. 2, explained the efficiency in a 1943 interview. In traditional shipbuilding, you cannot install the engine until the engine room is built. You cannot build the engine room until the hull is complete. Everything happens in sequence. Kaiser's approach allows parallel production. While one crew welds hull plates, another crew assembles the engine in a separate area. When both are ready, we drop the completed engine into the completed engine room and weld it in place. Tasks that previously required weeks now take hours. The statistics of parallel production revealed manufacturing efficiency that seemed impossible. A conventional shipyard might have 50 workers attempting to install an engine over 3 weeks, working in cramped confines of a partially complete engine room. Kaiser's prefabrication approach assigned 200 workers to assemble the complete engine and its mounting structure in an open workshop over 5 days, then used cranes to position the entire assembly in a single 8-hour operation. By fall 1942, competition developed among Kaiser's 7 shipyards spread across California, Oregon, and Washington. Clay Bedford oversaw the Richmond yards. Edgar Kaiser managed the Oregon Shipbuilding Corporation in Portland. The two men began an informal contest to see whose facility could build ships faster. The race became a public spectacle. Newspapers published updates like sports scores. In September 1942, Oregon Shipbuilding built the Joseph N. Teal in just 10 days, shattering previous records. But the ultimate demonstration came in November 1942. Vice Admiral Land visited Richmond and made an offhand comment to journalists that was overheard by Clay Bedford. The Admiral remarked that Liberty ship construction had improved remarkably, but noted the recent speed record still paled compared to what mass production had achieved in other industries. Bedford took the comment as a challenge. He proposed to Vice Admiral Land that Richmond Yard No. 2 would attempt to build a complete Liberty ship from keel laying to launch in under 10 days, cutting the Joseph N. Teal's record in half. Land, skeptical but intrigued, authorized the attempt on condition it not disrupt regular production schedules. Bedford selected the 47th hull to be built at Yard No. 2 for the record attempt. The ship would be named SS Robert E. Peary after the Arctic explorer. Starting Sunday, November 8th, at 1 minute past midnight, over 1,000 workers operating in carefully coordinated shifts would attempt something unprecedented in maritime history. The prefabrication strategy reached its ultimate expression. Every major component had been built, inspected, and staged before the keel touched the building way. The bow section, comprising more than 50 individual pieces, had been fully welded and equipped with anchor hardware, chain lockers, and forward crew quarters. The stern section included completed steering gear, propeller shaft, and aft crew spaces. 4 complete cargo holds, each a massive rectangular structure of steel. The engine, a 140-ton triple expansion steam power plant, had been mounted on its foundation structure and tested before leaving the factory. 4 days into construction, the hull was complete. Engine installed, deck houses positioned, cargo holds secured, steering gear mounted. On Thursday, November 12th, at 3:30 p.m., just 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes after the keel touched the building way, SS Robert E. Peary slid down the launching rails into San Francisco Bay. The ship was delivered for service on November 15th, setting an additional record of 7 days, 14 hours, and 32 minutes from keel laying to full delivery. The crowd of observers included maritime officials, military officers, competing shipyard owners, and journalists from across America. Many arrived expecting to witness either failure or a compromised vessel that looked complete but lacked functionality. What they saw instead was a fully operational ship requiring only minor fitting out before entering service. Vice Admiral Land made brief remarks recorded by newsreel cameras. His words captured the maritime establishment's forced recognition that everything had changed. 6 months ago, I would have called this impossible. Traditional shipbuilding wisdom accumulated over 3,000 years said, you cannot build a proper ship in 5 days. Henry Kaiser has made traditional wisdom obsolete. The United States Maritime Commission will now require all contracted shipyards to adopt these methods. The psychological impact on traditional shipbuilders was profound and immediate. The same yards that had dismissed Kaiser as an ignorant outsider just 18 months earlier now sent engineers to study his approaches. The president of New York Shipbuilding Corporation, one of America's oldest and most prestigious yards, visited Richmond in December 1942. His confidential report to his board of directors revealed complete ideological collapse. Kaiser has achieved what our industry considered impossible by refusing to accept our limitations. He treated shipbuilding as a manufacturing problem rather than a craft tradition. He simplified where we sought perfection. He standardized where we customized. He trained masses of unskilled workers where we cultivated generational expertise. The result is ships built in 1/10 the time at 2/3 the cost. We must either adopt his approaches or accept irrelevance. By early 1943, Kaiser's influence had transformed American maritime production. 18 shipyards across the country were building Liberty ships using prefabrication and welding. Average construction time had fallen from 230 days initially to just 42 days by mid-1943. The United States was launching 3 Liberty ships daily, more tonnage than German submarines could sink, but the true scale of transformation remained invisible to observers outside the United States. Invisible, especially to Japanese military planners who were attempting to assess American productive capacity. They could see American ships in the Pacific, they could count vessels in convoys, but they could not comprehend the industrial revolution occurring in American shipyards, could not imagine that ordinary citizens, given training and opportunity, were achieving results that traditional wisdom declared impossible. The transformation that Japanese intelligence failed to anticipate was accelerating beyond their comprehension. In January 1943, American shipyards launched approximately 60 Liberty ships. By March, that number had climbed to over 90. In May, 108 Liberty ships slid into the water. And in November 1943, American production reached its absolute peak. 128 Liberty ships completed in a single month. More than 4 ships launched every single day. The mathematics were staggering. Each Liberty ship could carry 10,800 deadweight tons of cargo. That meant in November 1943 alone, American shipyards added over 1,370,000 tons of new shipping capacity. In 1 month, Japanese intelligence had estimated total American production for the entire year at 5 million tons. The reality exceeded their projections by nearly 400%. Japanese naval officers, monitoring American shipping movements in the Pacific, began reporting phenomena they struggled to explain. Convoys that should have been impossible given known American maritime capacity, ships appearing in multiple theaters simultaneously, replacement vessels arriving weeks after losses. One Japanese naval intelligence report from mid-1943, preserved in captured documents, revealed the confusion. American merchant fleet expansion exceeds our calculation models. Either our intelligence regarding American shipyard capacity is catastrophically incomplete, or Americans have discovered construction methods we cannot comprehend. The report recommended immediate investigation, but Japanese intelligence infrastructure, focused overwhelmingly on Soviet threats and Chinese operations, lacked the personnel to conduct detailed analysis of American industrial organization. The few Japanese observers who had spent time in the United States before the war understood what was happening, but their warnings were dismissed. Admiral Yamamoto himself had tried to explain. In a letter written in January 1941, nearly a year before Pearl Harbor, Yamamoto told Diet member Sasakawa Ryoichi what defeating the United States would actually require. Should hostilities break out between Japan and the United States, it would not be enough to take Guam and the Philippines, nor even Hawaii and San Francisco. We would have to march into Washington and sign the treaty in the White House. The statement was not bravado, it was despair. Yamamoto understood that American industrial capacity, once fully mobilized, would produce war materials at rates Japan could never match. He had visited Detroit automobile factories. He had seen American oil fields. He understood that anyone who had witnessed these facilities knew Japan lacked the national power for an industrial race with America. But Yamamoto's warnings conflicted with prevailing Japanese military doctrine. The Japanese, Army and Navy had achieved stunning victories against larger opponents, Russia in 1905, China throughout the 1930s. These successes generated confidence that Japanese martial spirit and tactical superiority could overcome material disadvantages. The Japanese military culture emphasized fighting spirit, individual sacrifice, and warrior tradition. These qualities had proven decisive in previous conflicts. What Japanese strategists failed to account for was an opponent who could match fighting spirit with industrial output that rendered individual battles increasingly irrelevant. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. By mid-1943, The impact of American Liberty ship production was becoming undeniable in every theatre of war. The Battle of the Atlantic, which had nearly strangled Britain in 1942, turned decisively in favour of the Allies. German U-boats sank approximately 3.6 million tons of Allied shipping in 1943. American shipyards alone produced 19.3 million tons. The replacement rate exceeded 290%. Every U-boat kill was replaced by nearly 3 new ships. The mathematics of attrition that Germany had counted on to starve Britain simply collapsed. Admiral Karl Dönitz, commander of the German U-boat force, recognized the arithmetic but couldn't accept defeat. In his war diary for April 1943, he wrote that enemy new construction far exceeded the losses the U-boats could inflict. The enemy had succeeded in building cargo vessels on an assembly line system. Yet he continued sending submarines to certain death, believing determination could overcome industrial reality. In the Pacific, Japanese forces faced similar impossible arithmetic. Operation Cartwheel, the Allied offensive in the Solomon Islands and New Guinea, required moving hundreds of thousands of tons of supplies across thousands of miles of ocean. Japanese planners had calculated that American logistics would collapse under the strain of supporting simultaneous operations across such vast distances. Instead, Liberty ships appeared in numbers that seemed impossible. Guadalcanal received continuous supply despite Japanese air and naval attacks. Port Moresby became a major logistics hub supplied by convoys that arrived with mechanical regularity. Rabaul, the major Japanese stronghold, found itself progressively isolated as American shipping capacity enabled the Allies to simply bypass and starve major Japanese positions. Japanese pilots reported the same bewildering phenomenon. Airfields that should have taken months to build appeared in weeks. Aircraft that were shot down were replaced within days. Fuel dumps that were bombed rebuilt overnight. The logistical infrastructure supporting American operations operated at speeds that Japanese planning assumptions declared impossible. What Japanese observers didn't understand was that the Liberty ships carried more than cargo. They carried the systematic industrial approaches that Kaiser had pioneered. Prefabricated airfield components, standardized fuel storage systems, modular maintenance facilities, everything designed for rapid deployment by workers with minimal training. The same revolutionary thinking that produced ships in days was being applied to every aspect of American logistics. The human cost of Japanese strategic miscalculation became increasingly apparent throughout 1944. At peak production, Kaiser's 7 shipyards employed approximately 196,000 workers. Of these, over 40,000 were women. African-American workers numbered in the tens of thousands, employed in skilled positions, including welding, fitting, crane operation, and supervisory roles. This represented a level of industrial mobilization and social transformation that Japan, with its rigid social hierarchies and limited industrial base, simply could not replicate. By 1944, the 3 Northwest Kaiser yards alone employed over 31,000 women. At Richmond, women comprised 27% of the production workforce. These weren't auxiliary workers in support roles. These were welders, riveters, crane operators, and ship fitters, performing the core work of ship construction. The democratization of skilled work that Kaiser enabled carried implications far beyond wartime production. By proving that complex manufacturing could be performed by trained workers rather than requiring generational craft expertise, Kaiser's shipyards challenged fundamental assumptions about labor, skill, and industrial organization. Japanese industry, by contrast, remained dependent on traditional apprenticeship systems and skilled craftsmen who required years of training. The pace of industrial expansion that this approach permitted could never match American mass production methods. Japan's total merchant ship production for the entire war was approximately 4.1 million tons across 7 years. The United States built more merchant shipping in the first 4.5 months of 1943 than Japan produced during the entire conflict. The disparity extended beyond raw numbers to fundamental strategic capability. Each Liberty ship could carry 2,840 jeeps, or 440 light tanks, or 260 medium tanks, or 230 million rounds of rifle ammunition. The United States built 2,710 Liberty ships. That represented potential capacity to transport over 7 million jeeps, or over 1 million tanks, or over 600 billion rounds of ammunition. These weren't theoretical calculations. These ships were actually transporting these materials across every ocean, to every battlefront, supporting operations on a scale that Japanese logistics could never approach. Admiral Chester Nimitz, commander of the Pacific Fleet, reflected on the strategic impact in his post-war memoir, published in 1960. We fought across 5,000 miles of Pacific Ocean, supplied by ships built faster than the enemy could sink them. Japan's military planners assumed American industrial capacity was impressive but finite. They believed that if they sank enough ships, eventually American logistics would collapse and we would be forced to negotiate. They failed to account for Henry Kaiser. By 1944, we were replacing shipping losses faster than they could inflict them. The mathematics of attrition favored the side that could build 3 ships daily over the side that could sink 2 ships daily. Industrial capacity, not martial valor, determined the outcome. The Pacific War was won in the shipyards of Richmond, Portland, and Baltimore, as much as on the beaches of Iwo Jima and Okinawa. The moment when Japanese military leadership truly understood the scale of American production is difficult to pinpoint precisely. No single document records a dramatic revelation. Instead, the realization crept in gradually through accumulating evidence that could no longer be rationalized away. Japanese merchant shipping losses mounted throughout 1943 and 1944. By late 1944, Japan had lost approximately 80% of its merchant fleet. The vital sea lanes to Southeast Asia that provided oil, rubber, and other essential resources were being severed. American submarines, supported by the very logistics infrastructure Liberty ships enabled, were sinking Japanese vessels faster than they could be replaced. The tonnage war that Admiral Yamamoto had feared was playing out exactly as he had predicted. Japan was losing not because Japanese ships were inferior, not because Japanese sailors lacked courage, but because American industry could build replacements faster than Japanese forces could sink them. The captured diary of a Japanese naval officer, translated after the war, recorded observations from late 1944. We intercept American radio traffic coordinating convoy movements. The number of vessels referenced exceeds our intelligence estimates of total American merchant fleet capacity. Either American codes are deliberately inflating numbers to deceive us, or our understanding of American shipbuilding is fundamentally wrong. I fear it is the latter. We are not fighting the American Navy we studied before the war. We are fighting an industrial colossus we did not know existed. Another Japanese officer's account, preserved in post-war interviews, described a moment of clarity in early 1945. I was reviewing reconnaissance photographs of American anchorages in the Pacific. Ships stretched to the horizon. More ships than I had seen in all my years of naval service. I realized then that we had never had any chance of victory. We were fighting a nation that could build faster than we could destroy. The final statistics tell the story with brutal clarity. Japan built 1,162 U-boats during World War II. The United States alone built 2,710 Liberty ships, plus 531 Victory ships, plus 492 tankers, plus thousands of other vessels. For every submarine Japan commissioned, America launched more than 2 Liberty ships alone. The naval production disparity was even more stark. In the 3 years following the Battle of Midway, Japan built 6 aircraft carriers. The United States built 17 fleet carriers, plus dozens of escort carriers. Even if Japan had won catastrophically at Midway, even if the United States had lost all its carriers, American shipyards would have achieved parity with Japan in carrier strength by September 1943. By mid-1944, the United States would have had nearly 2-to-1 superiority. The long-term implications were inescapable. The United States could afford losses that Japan simply could not. The technology gap widened as American production continued. Liberty ships began carrying radar that could detect surfaced submarines at night. High-frequency direction finders pinpointed submarines transmitting radio messages. Some Liberty ships were converted to escort carriers, bringing aircraft to mid-ocean where Japanese submarines had once operated safely. Japan attempted to counter with new technology, but the industrial base couldn't support rapid innovation and mass production simultaneously. The Type 21 submarine, with high underwater speed and sophisticated sensors, promised to restore German advantage in the Atlantic, but only 4 became operational before war's end. Germany built 118 Type 21 submarines. America had already built those 2,710 Liberty ships. By late 1944, the war's outcome was no longer in doubt. American forces were advancing across the Pacific, supplied by the maritime infrastructure that Liberty ships provided. The Philippines were being liberated. Iwo Jima and Okinawa would fall in 1945, providing bases for the final assault on Japan itself. Each advance was supported by logistics that Japanese forces could not match. American troops received hot food, mail from home, replacement equipment, and medical care. Japanese forces starved, cut off from supplies, reduced to eating roots and leaves, dying of malnutrition and disease as much as combat. The disparity wasn't just in weapons or tactics. It was in the fundamental capacity to sustain military operations across oceanic distances. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945 forced Japan's surrender before the planned invasion of the home islands could commence. But even without atomic weapons, the outcome was predetermined. American, blockade, and conventional bombing had already destroyed Japan's capacity to continue the war. 3 million Japanese casualties, 80% of shipping lost, 35% of industrial machinery destroyed, 25% of buildings gone, 25% of national wealth evaporated. American air power delivered most of this damage, but it was brought into range by the Navy, and the Navy was enabled by merchant shipping. The Liberty ships that carried fuel for the fleet, spare parts for aircraft, food for sailors, ammunition for guns. The unglamorous but essential logistics that determined modern war's outcome. Admiral Dönitz, in his memoirs published in 1958, provided the final assessment from the Axis perspective. The German U-boat campaign was wrecked by the introduction of the convoy system and by the enemy's immense shipbuilding program, especially the Liberty ships, which no U-boat force could have defeated. It was belated recognition of what American shipyard workers had understood from the beginning, that modern war is won in factories as much as on battlefields. Japanese military leaders reached similar conclusions, though few recorded them as explicitly. The assumption that fighting spirit could overcome material disadvantage proved tragically wrong. The belief that American democracy would prove weak and divided collapsed against the reality of industrial mobilization. The gamble that early victories would force American negotiation failed when confronted with a nation capable of building ships faster than enemies could sink them. The legacy of the Liberty ship program extended far beyond World War II victory. Of the 2,710 Liberty ships built, approximately 2,510 survived the war. Many remained in commercial service for decades. The SS John W. Brown and SS Jeremiah O'Brien survive as museum ships, testament to American industrial mobilization. The SS Albert M. Bow, the last Liberty ship built and delivered on October 30, 1945, remains today as the landlocked headquarters of Trident Seafoods in Kodiak, Alaska. Still in existence 8 decades after construction, these ships outlasted the entire Japanese merchant marine. Proof that sufficient quantity becomes its own quality in modern warfare. The techniques Kaiser pioneered became standard practice in global shipbuilding. When Japan and South Korea rebuilt their maritime industries in the 1950s and 1960s, they studied Kaiser's Liberty ship program and adopted his approaches as the foundation of their yards. The massive shipbuilding facilities in Ulsan, South Korea, and Nagasaki, Japan, that would dominate world shipping construction for decades, were direct descendants of Richmond Shipyard's revolutionary practices. The prefabrication, welding, and parallel assembly that Kaiser developed became universal standards. Every modern shipyard, whether building container vessels in Korea oil tankers in Japan, or cruise ships in Europe, uses approaches derived from Kaiser's Liberty Ship program. John Bunker, professor of maritime history at the State University of New York Maritime College, summarized Kaiser's lasting influence in his definitive study published in 1972. Kaiser entered shipbuilding as an outsider, ignorant of maritime tradition, unconstrained by conventional wisdom, and willing to apply manufacturing principles that the established industry considered inappropriate for ship construction. In 36 months, he built more ships than had been constructed in America during the entire previous century. More importantly, he fundamentally altered how ships would be built worldwide for the remainder of the 20th century. The modular construction, prefabrication, and welded assembly that Kaiser pioneered are now universal standards. Every modern shipyard uses approaches derived from Kaiser's Liberty Ship program. The story ultimately stands as testament to a profound truth about human capability and industrial possibility. The ships themselves, while crucial to Allied victory, mattered less than what their construction proved. Ordinary people, given training and opportunity, could achieve extraordinary results. Complex products previously requiring years of craft tradition could be manufactured in weeks using systematized processes. Industries resistant to change for centuries could be revolutionized in months when necessity and innovation combined. Japanese military planners who dismissed Liberty ships in early 1942 as crude, ugly, and inferior learned through devastating defeat that American shipyards had made their entire strategy obsolete. The quality they prized was overwhelmed by quantity produced at speeds they considered impossible. The final irony came in the post-war years. While Japanese military equipment became museum pieces and memorials, Liberty ships continued working. Some sailed into the 1960s and 1970s under various flags, carrying the commerce of peace. The ugly ducklings that Japanese naval officers had mocked outlived the entire Japanese submarine fleet by decades. The vessels designed as emergency ships with expected service lives of 5 years proved remarkably durable. Many remained operational for 20 years or more. 3 Liberty ships survived long enough to become museum ships in the 21st century. The SS John W. Brown participated in the 50th anniversary commemoration of D-Day in 1994, actually sailing to Normandy under its own power 50 years after the invasion. Physical proof that American industrial mobilization had created something far more lasting than temporary expedients. The transformation that began with Henry Kaiser's first shipbuilding contract in December 1940 continued influencing American manufacturing for decades. The healthcare innovation that emerged from providing medical care for Kaiser's workforce eventually evolved into Kaiser Permanente, one of America's largest health maintenance organizations, serving over 12 million members by the early 21st century. The employment opportunities that shipyards gave thousands of young people, especially women and minorities, opened doors that stayed open for the rest of their lives. The workers who learned to weld and fit and fabricate carried those skills and confidence into peacetime careers that rebuilt America's post-war economy. The organizational principles of parallel production, simplified specifications, and rapid worker training became foundational concepts in operations management and industrial engineering education. Professor Michael Porter at Harvard Business School, analyzing American industrial competitiveness in a 1985 study, identified the Liberty Ship program as a crucial case study in rapid capability development. Kaiser demonstrated that industrial capacity is not fixed, but can be created quickly when necessity demands it. The United States entered World War II with minimal merchant shipbuilding capability. Within 24 months, American yards were producing more tonnage than the rest of the world combined. This proved that industrial infrastructure, workforce skills, and production systems could all be developed at unprecedented speed when properly organized. That lesson has relevance beyond wartime emergency. It suggests that perceived limitations on industrial capacity often reflect organizational and conceptual constraints rather than physical impossibilities. The psychological transformation that the Liberty Ship program created among industrial managers and engineers proved as significant as the physical ships produced. Before Kaiser, manufacturing executives accepted conventional wisdom about production limits, skill requirements, and organizational structures. Kaiser demonstrated that conventional wisdom could be wrong, and that breakthrough performance required questioning fundamental assumptions. The Liberty ships became symbols of what happens when tradition is challenged by necessity, when experts who claim impossibility are proven wrong by practitioners who simply attempt the work, when ordinary people achieve extraordinary results because someone believed they could and organized systems that allowed them to prove it. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.